Hello there, World of Tankers, and welcome to the channel. I'm your host, World of Blitz, and in today's video, I'll be breaking into the best beginner heavy to get your hands on in Tier 10. Now, a lot of you might be thinking that I'm going to say the IS-7, but that is actually not the case. While I do think the IS-7 itself is an absolutely amazing tank, the problem that people forget is getting to that Tier 10. You need to get through the IS, the IS-3, and the IS-8. And yeah, these are actually rather tricky tanks to play. The IS-3, even after its armor buff, still features pretty lackluster armor, and with only 5 degrees of gun depression, it is a very awkward tank to drive. And because of that, it can be rather unenjoyable. And the IS-8, well, it's a great tank. I mean, it's got super solid DPM and even decent mobility. But the problem with the IS-8 is that it has no hull armor, and once again, 5 degrees of gun depression. It is not an easy tank to drive. In fact, I'd be willing to say the IS-8 is one of the hardest Tier 10s in the game. So while the IS-7 might be one of the best Tier 10s for a beginner, it is so painful to actually get to the Tier 10 that it's not really worth it to go for, in my opinion. In today's video, I'll be recommending the T110E5. This is the Tier 10 American Tech Tree Heavy. It's a vehicle that is fantastic, in my opinion, on its capabilities for any skill level, and the line itself, grinding up to it, is also really good. You start off at the T29 at Tier 7. This vehicle features a fantastic gun with some of the highest pen values, 214 mils on the standard, 260 on the premium. This is easily going to cut through even the majority of Tier 8 heavies. When you pair that with 10 degrees of gun depression, very, very solid mobility at a top speed of 35, an average power to weight of 14, and I mean, the tank's actually surprisingly mobile, that's what I'll say. And when you add all this together with a turret that's 280 millimeters thick and a lot of HP because of that sandbags, this is just, in general, a really hard tank to deal with. Talking about sandbags, just in case you don't know what they are, essentially in your provisions, you have the ability to run enhanced sandbags. These are quite expensive for credits if you are trying to save credits, but they're definitely worth it in my opinion because it is increasing your hit points by an additional 138. That's quite a large buff, and it does obviously allow you to survive a little bit longer in the battlefield. So that's something that's nice for the whole line, especially in the lower tiered vehicles. After making your way from the T29, you have a very similar playstyle in the T32. It's basically just a beefier version. Your upper plate becomes a lot stronger, and the turret becomes even thicker at 300 millimeters thick. The T32 has easily one of the strongest turrets in Tier 8, and when you pair that with 10 degrees of gun depression and a fairly solid gun with, once again, very good pen, 235 on the standard, 278 on the premium, you're not going to worry at all about cutting through opponents. The only real downside of this vehicle is bad dispersion, but that's honestly good because it teaches you to aim in and take your time when shooting opponents. The T32 is also pretty fast, going at a top speed of 35, with very similar mobility to the T29. Breaking into the M103, this is where the line definitely jumps up in terms of firepower. You are now featuring a 400 damage per shot gun with over 380 millimeters of heat pen running calibrated shells. The vehicle has very good DPM at 2,300, decent dispersion, and overall is just a super dangerous gun. You do lose a bit of gun depression sitting at 8 degrees, but it's more than enough to get the job done. Mobility-wise is very similar to the rest in the line, which is very nice. In fact, it's a little bit faster on power to weight, which is really nice. Turret armor is good, but not amazing. It says 127, but that's actually not the case. It's quite a bit stronger. Basically, you do have little weak spots on the cheeks, but apart from that, you're still going to be getting a lot of bounces in this tank, and because the gun is so good on this vehicle, it usually makes up for the rather poor armor on the turret. The hull is very troll. Overall, the M103, I think it's definitely the weakest in armor on the whole line, but because the gun is so amazing and its mobility is quite nice, it's still a very flexible and I would say rather beginner-friendly tank to drive. And that brings us to the T110E5, which is the best by far. This tank's playstyle is very simple. Hide the lower plate. That is all you need to do. When you hide the lower plate, your entire upper plate becomes around 300 effective. And the turret is nearly impervious. You have a hatch on the roof, which we can see here that is a weak spot. But apart from that hatch, you're really not going to be penning this vehicle much frontally. Now, obviously, you got to keep your turret faced towards your opponents. If you're looking at somebody over here and there's somebody off to your left, they're going to shoot you. But for the most part, This tank is very easy in that regard. The tank is also rather fast. It goes at a top speed of 42 with a power weight of 18. So you're not going to have to worry at all when it comes to mobility with this tank. It's got incredibly good DPM at 2,600, ridiculously good dispersion at 0.303. It's an accurate, hard-hitting, high pen heavy, and it's got 8 degrees of gun depression. So we've talked quite a bit about this vehicle. Let's actually make our way into some gameplay and see what the T110E5 can do. Here we are on Vineyards. Now the first thing you want to do whenever loading into a battle is a look at what you have on your team, what you have on the enemy team, and most specifically, where your teammates are going. So we can see that the enemy team has 3 heavy tanks, 2 tank destroyers, and 2 mediums. And we can see that our team has 2 heavies, and then 3 tank destroyers and 2 mediums. So we have a downside on heavies, but we have an upside on mediums. However, you'll notice that our boss Shotgun is not going where you would want your light tank to go. Normally you want a light to go down this route over here, or into this bush up top, because they will give you very important spotting on the enemy team. And even though that Batchat is giving our team very important spots, the problem that that player doesn't see is that nobody's over there. So that really just doesn't do much. But we are going to make our way up top here, and we actually might get a shell into the C100, which we do. Easy shell. The playstyle of a T110E5 is very simple. You drive it into a hull down position, which means that your turret is only visible and the rest of your tank is hidden in cover, and you bleed. So we shoot an easy shot into the enemy T30. We can also see that that T30 fired, so we're going to be able to easily reload again and get another shell into his tank. By the way, aiming for track wheels is one of the most important skills you can have in the game, as it allows you to get much faster shots out, and it locks down your opponent while penning them. So as you can see, we've already cleared an enemy tank, which is sorry, I was going to say Emil because I saw him in the corner of my eye, but the T30. We do have the 50B who crossed, however, we were not able to get a shell out into his vehicle at that case in time. Okay, well, we're going to move up. At this point, we are able to, pretty freely, as we can see where the enemy team is, and we know where they aren't. So we can box in, ideally, this enemy E100. We're going to aim it on his lower plate. You can see the T110E5. It does take a bit of time to aim in, but it's very accurate. And this is with V-stabs as well, so you could make it even more accurate if you ran refined gun. However, I don't really see that as much of a necessity. However, what I do see is obviously a TVP in front of us. The XM66F has dug on our side. However, I don't think it's that much of a big deal. We're going to aim in a high explosive on the side of the enemy TVP, dealing 570 damage. And what I'm really hoping is that the enemy Contracaro rolls off to his side, which allows us to be in a pretty solid spot. Now the XM is, well, he's YOLOing us, is really the best way to word it. And we have the TVP on us as well. But that XM basically killed himself for that, so it wasn't really worth it. E100, as we can see, isn't looking at us. So even though we did make a pretty big aggression here, we knew that we had teammates behind us. Oh my rat, what am I looking at here? Okay, no, that's not happening. That is just called, unfortunate. I mean, we didn't really make a misplay there. The enemy tanks just got spotted when we made a play, which almost turned out to be really, really scary. But we're getting out damage. We're already at 3,700 this game. We can see this is why the high damage per minute that this tank has is quite fantastic. We get an easy shell into the enemy E100. Just like that, we have a victory. So, pretty good game to really showcase how you want to take apart a situation, not only on a game level, but in a tank like this. You'll notice how I tried to put myself in a rather well, holding spot. That XM I was a little worried about. I honestly thought he was going to YOLO me, and I don't know why he drove out in the open. He basically killed himself, and he's a decent player, as you can see, but it doesn't matter how skilled you are at the game. If you have teammates behind you, which we did, once again, rinse and repeat the same strategy. Look at the enemy lineup, see what they have. BZ-75, Object 260, and a Super Conqueror VK-90. So that is 4 heavy tanks. They also have a 268 version 4, which is a heavily armored tank destroyer. So that's actually 5 heavies. And, well, that's about it. They got a 907 and a 268. But we are going to be expecting a fierce fight on this flank up the map. Now we got 2 different options. We can stay back here, and we can work this position here, or I can move up a little bit further and go there. Those are the 2 options I have. Now, early game, I want to see what teammates I have. So I have a 50B on my wide. I have a Badger. Well, there's the enemy 260. We are going to get a shell into the 260. And what we're going to do is we are going to dig over here and get into this position. Because I have that 50B covering me, I'm quite confident that even if I do get rushed or the enemy tries to make some aggressive maneuvers on me, that 50B is going to be able to support me, hopefully, to at least enough of a degree that the enemy cannot rush me. And we can see here that I'm using the high levels of heat pen this vehicle has to deal with the enemy. But, of course, as always, here it comes, the YOLOs. So, this is what happens when you think that the enemy team isn't going to YOLO you, but they do. But why is the 268 doing this? Well, I can't tell you, because he killed himself for it. Now we got a VK90 over here, and we're still holding the spot. Our 50B's still alive. So, even though the enemy's YOLOing, they're not really gaining much from it, and we can see that here. We're going to over-poke and shoot the 268 version 4. He doesn't have the gun depression to hit us back and actually misses the shot. And we do have a 183 still covering us, which is obviously quite important. VK90 misses. And now we're going to face hug the VK90. Once again, this is classic example of just people who don't know what they're doing. Why are you YOLOing the E5? I don't know. That is now 2 tier 10s that have died for no reason when they could have held. And a great example of why this is such a good holding vehicle. Now, at this point, I don't really care if the 268 version 4 pens me. I could have just loaded gold the whole time, but I was trying to fire an AP because it does a little bit more damage. But either way, a pretty solid result. We are going to get behind this enemy Super Conqueror, and we're going to load in a high explosive shell, which deals over 500 damage. And at this point, there's only 2 tanks left on the enemy team, a BZ-75 and a 268 version 4. And as much as I would love to shoot the 268 version 4, the Karo is going to drive into me, but oh well. We lost out 300 damage, it's not the biggest deal. So, as we can see, this was a great example of why you need teammates behind you. If you're not paying attention to what's behind you, you die. If I didn't have that 50B and the 183 directly behind me, we would have instantly lost that game. But we assisted 2,300 damage, we did over 4,000 damage, and we just kind of combined all that together to get a win out. Even though the 50B didn't do much, he still had 2,600 health and worked as a distraction for us to live longer. The 183 did a decent amount, bleeding the enemy, and the 113 was also able to bleed them in the side. When enemies make YOLOs, they sometimes get rewarded, but most of the time they get punished. And people should learn their lessons. I have no clue why that 268 did what he did. I have no clue why the VK90 did what he did. Very bad plays from the enemy, and thankfully our team was able to capitalize off of that and take advantage of what went on. So let's do one final battle for today's video. Third is the charm, and let's see how the E5 can perform. But you're getting a good idea of already what its capabilities are. It's able to hold very well, it's able to use its high pen and solid DPM to deal with opponents quite easily. As we've seen for the previous 2 battles we've played in the E5, the major reason why the tank is so enjoyable is because it's just flexible in really any engagement you get stuck in. Its gun is accurate, it's got good armor, and it's got very solid DPM with penetration. And it's been working fine. We've been cutting through our opponents, and we're getting the job done. So we are going to make our way towards the medium flank. And if you're wondering why, it's pretty simple to see. Once again, you gotta stick with the team. If you go alone without your team, you're throwing battles. You need to make sure that you are sticking together. And usually you want to go wide. You can see I'm doing that right now. Going wide is just smart in general because you're not going to be spotted by usually tank destroyers that are sitting there. You always want to keep that in mind. So because of that, right now we are quite safe and we're doing all right. We have the enemy Stritzvon in front of us, and as much as I would love to shoot him, unfortunately our Rhino kind of got in our way, but we were still able to get the shell out. Alright, not too bad. The enemy Stritzvon is already dead, and even though we've only dealt 400 damage, it's pretty easy stuff so far. We are now going to put on our adrenaline, and wow, that 183 absolutely deleted that enemy tank. Alright, well, we got the Boss Shotzion driving over the ridge. We get a shell into him. What is going on here? I don't know. Well, we're going to reload again, and we'll see if we can maybe get a shell into the Progetto. However, it did not hit. That's also probably, in fact, that we just have teammates kind of everywhere in our way a little bit. Alright, so at this point, we can see what's happening, and we can see where we're able to take advantage of our enemy. I'm pretty sure I heard the enemy grill fire, so we have the opportunity at this current time to cross and get a little bit more aggressive against this enemy Progetto. So we're going to aim it on his side. However, of course, the moment we shoot at his side armor, he also manages to almost accidentally angle his tank against us and get a bounce there. It's not the biggest deal ever, but still a little annoying. Nice shot into the enemy Sheridan, and we're going to back up a little bit. The Grill fires an HE at us, which is an interesting choice. We're going to load a shell onto the enemy Sheridan. We get a bounce there. And, yeah, I mean, E5's doing a great job, as we can see. The tank itself is getting out bounces. We're going to get a shell into the enemy Sheridan, clearing him. And now we got 3 tanks left. We got a Foch who's a one-shot, a Grill who's a one-shot, so really all that I care about at this point is the enemy Progetto, which we fire a high explosive shell into the rear of the turret on. So, yeah, pretty easy stuff. Unfortunately, our boss Shotzion misses the shell. However, the Grill does not escape us, and we get it clear. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what's been going on in these games today. It's been a little crazy. Like, people are just YOLOing like crazy, and half of these games just made me actually have a little bit of brain cell lossage. But we did 3,100 damage. We did top on the team, and that is 3 very solid games for the T110E5. In general, this is a fantastic heavy. It's a vehicle that is able to hold, it's able to dish out damage, and it's able, in really any situation, to do well. Yes, there are weaknesses for this vehicle. The sides are very poor, and the rear is incredibly weak. It also only reverses at 12, which means if you overexpose yourself, you possibly are going to regret it deeply. But the advantages, having incredible hull armor, very good top speed, great gun depression, and a very accurate gun, more than enough make up for the downsides. So, personally, I think the T110E5 is not only one of the best tier 10 heavies in the game, but it is one of the best vehicles in the game to grind for a beginner. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree, if you disagree, and please consider smashing that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.